All right, well, we are ready to get started. Welcome, everyone, and good evening. It's great to be with you all here. I'm Bret Wagner, candidate for MMSD School Board, Seat 3. And tonight we're addressing a fundamental question in education. That question is, do we need alternative school models to drive innovation, or can we innovate within our own public schools? This isn't just an academic debate. So right now, Madison is considering a proposal for Pathway Career and College Academy. We're seeing continued pressure to expand voucher programs statewide. The argument that we often hear is that we need these alternatives to drive innovation and improvement, or even more simply, that families should have more choice. But what does the evidence actually show? So after 3 decades of experimentation, particularly with charter schools, we've learned something crucial, that success isn't about governance structure. It's about specific practices that belong in our classrooms. So I'm going to try to reframe the discussion about vouchers, about school choice, about charters and other alternative school models. But before we dive into those practices, let's understand the different models being discussed, what they offer, and what the research tells us about their effectiveness. So I'll show you a table of the different models that are more common. I did a lot of searching for this information, and I was not able to find a clear, concise, single view of the different models out there, the advantages, the disadvantages, and some of the other considerations. So I'll share that with you here in a bit. So let me quickly explain how tonight's session will work. Again, this is a virtual town hall, so please use the raise hand feature to ask a question like you might in a town hall. Type the questions in the chat at any time. I'll do my best to try to keep an eye on those. Use reactions to show agreement and support. And please remain on mute unless you have a question or comment. You can feel free to leave at any time and re-enter the town hall. It's open, so you should be able to move in and out. So if you have to drop the kids off or go tend to dinner or the myriad other things that everyone is so busy doing, please feel free to just stay online and go, again, just hang out on mute, or you can leave and come back at any time. And as we get into discussion, if there is discussion, I just ask that you follow these guidelines. So we're here to focus on solutions, not just the challenges, but we do encourage you to share your experiences. Please be specific in your questions, respect everyone's perspective, and keep comments brief to allow time for others. So for those that didn't get a chance to hear about me last week's session, let me just start with who I am. I'm an engineer by training. I've also taught high school. I taught high school science, integrated physics and chemistry to freshmen and chemistry to juniors in Houston Independent School District. But most importantly, I'm a dad to 2 MMSD students. I also serve as the Cherokee Heights Middle School PFO president, and it's been a privilege working with leaders there as well as the staff. We've seen firsthand how building strong school communities transforms outcomes. It's been a multi-year journey. There has been really consistent, steady, and solid leadership there over the last 5 or 6 years, and I've experienced 3 years of that with Principal Moreno. My background with all these experiences gives me a unique perspective. So I understand the data-driven side and the technical side of this work, as well as the human sides of education. As far as the reasons why I'm running, our schools work best when every student has the support they need, when we let teachers do what they do best, and when we use real data to make smart choices. And that's why I'm running. because getting these basics right matters for every kid in Madison. And my 3 core priorities reflect this. So number 1, striving for student excellence through equity. And that's represented in things like ensuring every child has a no-cost, healthy breakfast to start the school day. Prioritizing mental health resources for students, their families, teachers, and school staff. And expanding early intervention programs and advanced learning opportunities to push those kids who are ready. Number 2, treating teachers as trusted professionals. That includes examining and increasing the teacher compensation package, providing exclusive, innovative professional development opportunities for teachers, and giving the teachers a freedom to teach and classroom autonomy by reducing administrative burdens and letting them do what they do best, why they got into teaching, which is to teach, to inspire, and to lead, not to complete paperwork or myriad other regulatory or other requirements. One of the things here that we'll dive into in subsequent sessions is talk about some of those regulatory requirements. So while I'm not advocating to ignore regulatory and policy, I am advocating for a careful review of what are teachers currently being asked to do that are required, regulated, and are those things serving our students in a greater educational cause. Number 3, third and final, prioritizing results and transparency. So ensuring that there are clear milestones and accountability measures that are publicly available, enacting quarterly public reports on school budget spending, on classroom resources, student support services and infrastructure, and designing a user-friendly method, call it an online portal or some other way, where parents and community members can view financial statements and can track progress on district initiatives. All right, so let's get into the school models here. And this is that table I mentioned to earlier in the call. This is going to help frame our conversation about what works best for Madison's students. Traditional public schools are really the bedrock of our education system. They ensure universal access. They have established oversight structures, so local school board control and oversight, and they benefit from integrated district services. While they may have less flexibility due to standardized policies, just based on the size and the requirement of serving all needs, they do provide consistent, equitable education for all students, and that is the charge of our public education system. When we look at charter schools, there are really 2 types. So there are instrumentality charters where staff remain district employees, offer some program flexibility while maintaining district benefits and support. And this also carries with it local school board control. For non-instrumentality charters, these operate independently, and that gives them more flexibility, but also creates challenges around resource stability and support services. And interestingly enough, and this is really important, we'll touch on it throughout today's presentation. Academically, the research shows that on average, charter schools perform about the same as traditional public schools. It's not the governance model that drives success. All right. Some examples here. We've got Badger Rock Middle School and Nuestro Mundo Elementary School. These are both instrumentality charter schools. I want to focus on 2 models that show particular promise within our existing district structure. We've got magnet schools and community schools here. The magnet schools offer specialized programs. Think STEM, arts, or language immersion, or social action, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. They also remain fully part of the district, and that's really important. So they can promote voluntary integration and create centers of excellence while leveraging the infrastructure and the integration and district resources. There are challenges around transportation costs and ensuring equitable access, but these can be addressed through thoughtful implementation. Spring Harbor in MMSD is an environmental studies magnet. Another example is James C. Wright Middle School. This is a social action magnet school. And the fifth type here, community schools. These are particularly exciting, and I've experienced this firsthand as I've had both of our kids have gone to a community school. These integrate additional services and strengthen community partnerships while maintaining the benefits of our traditional public school model. They provide comprehensive student and family support. They address non-academic barriers to learning, like health, food insecurity, and others, and they leverage community resources. While coordinating these services does require careful planning and sustained funding, the impact on student success can be significant. We've got a number of community schools that are proving this model quite successful. Mendota Elementary, Leopold Elementary, Hawthorne Elementary. I saw some incredible data from Lakeview Elementary about student engagement, a feeling of community and safety on the part of staff at Lakeview Elementary. Hope to get into that more throughout the campaign. Sandburg Elementary is another one. Orchard Ridge Elementary, Southside Elementary. These are all community schools within MMSD. And I think what's really important to understand here is that many of the benefits of these models, these benefits can be achieved within existing school governance structure by implementing proven practices systematically. So we can expand these successes and the lessons learned in these 11 schools that have alternative models, expand those lessons to the rest of the district. But it's not about choosing between models, as we're trying to establish here. It's about identifying what works and implementing it effectively across all of our schools. So as we think about MMSD's future, we should focus on incorporating the best elements of these models, the comprehensive support of community schools, the specialized programming of magnet schools, while maintaining the strengths and some of the economies of scale of our traditional public schools. Keep in mind, universal access, strong oversight, and integrated services, all part of that public bedrock, that public foundation. This approach really allows us to innovate within the district while ensuring every student benefits, not just those in specialized programs. All right. So because charter schools have been talked about and written about so much in various forums and periodicals, I thought I'd just take a quick moment here to share a bit about charter school history. It is really interesting. This is a model that's really only been around for about 35 years. Now, you know, there have been different and innovative education models throughout history. But again, charter schools, really about 35 years. So in 1991, Minnesota, our neighbor to the north and west, passed the first charter school law in the United States. And then over that next decade, we saw rapid expansion from 3,000 to 6,000 charter schools in the 2000s. By the academic school year 2021-22, about 3.7 million students were enrolled in charter schools, and that represented about 7% of all public school students. So pretty significant. Charter schools were developed in part to serve as an R&D engine, a research and development engine for traditional public schools, resulting in a wide variety of school strategies and outcomes. There are probably 7 or 8 major flavors or types of charter schools even. Here's what's interesting. This period of experimentation taught us something crucial, that success doesn't have to be about the type of school. It's about what happens inside the classroom. So while charter schools were designed to be the research and development engines for education, namely because many felt our public schools were not successful at the time, we're not evolving fast enough, we're not innovating. These charter schools, they really did serve their purpose. They've showed us, they've helped us to identify what works. And so I would really emphasize, and I have been emphasizing in my campaign, that now is the time to implement these lessons learned in our public schools. All right, we don't need additional models, and as you'll hear later in the proposed charter school that's in front of the school board at the moment, career pathways and a focus on what college means, either 2-year technical, community college, or a 4-year college. That's all part of the curriculum right now. It's a matter of expansion and effectively aligning and implementing these programs. So we'd be remiss not to mention the research here and why I'm making these points. Here's what the research actually shows. There was a landmark study by Will Dobie and Roland Fryer at Harvard. These individuals examined what makes schools effective, and what they found was pretty fascinating. I think many watching this will be surprised. In this paper, the authors collected data on the inner workings of 39 charter schools, and they correlated that data with credible estimates of each school's effectiveness. The traditional measures that we often focus on, things like class size, things like per pupil spending, teacher certification rates, advanced degrees, these showed limited correlation with school effectiveness. But 5 specific practices explain nearly half of the variation in school success. So think about that. 45% of what makes a school effective comes down to 5 practices that are implementable regardless of the school model. They can be done in public school, private school, charter school. It doesn't matter. And what are those practices? Let's break them down. High expectations is the first one. So this isn't just about setting the bar high. It's about believing every student can reach it, providing the support to get there. And in MMSD, we see this working. In our AVID program, has shown incredible results, proven statistically significant results where students are exceeding expectations when given the right support. I'd also point out that high expectations, I've had a chance to experience a number of charter schools. During my time in Houston Independent School District, I had a chance to tour some really compelling charter school models in Houston that were started in Houston by Houston ISD teachers. Yes College Prep and KIPP. KIPP Academy in particular, you walk into a KIPP school and it is an experience. You see high expectations everywhere, not just the classroom, but on the walls, in the hallways, plastered on the front of the building. Everywhere there's this expectation for the students to perform and to perform well. The frequent teacher feedback is the second key factor. Teachers, like any professionals, thrive with regular constructive feedback. And I'd also point out that this goes 2 ways here. The teacher feedback to the students is important. So I think both of these things are key, but this requires time, right? Time we need to build into the school day. Data-driven instruction is the third. This means using real-time information to adjust teaching, identify struggling students early, and measure what's working. And not just standardized testing to a standard grade level, but also growth in those students. Being able to measure baseline for that student, what is their growth in a semester or school year. High dosage tutoring. The research here is clear that when students have the option to access intensive tutoring, they benefit from understanding and growth. This isn't cheap, but it is one of the most effective interventions that we have. That one-on-one or one-on-few tutoring, having used it myself at the college level, but also seen this working in my own classroom, it works. Sometimes we just have to tailor our approach, and that is what tutoring is really all about. It's truly individualized teaching. And finally, increased instructional time. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean longer school days for the students and for the teachers. It means reducing administrative burden, increasing efficiency and productivity in the classroom so that teachers can focus on teaching. So let's look at a few success stories here. Really, I've got a couple. How are these already working in Madison? I mentioned the AVID program. This demonstrates success. So we're seeing improved GPAs, increased enrollment in AP and honors courses, better attendance rates, and higher college persistence. I also like to call it a public-private partnership through the Boys and Girls Club of Dane County and a number of area businesses through generous grants, donations, and a vision formed McKenzie Regional Workforce Center that's currently serving 1,900 youth, with 80% being Black or Latino students and 75% from low-income families. So this program shows what's possible out in the community when we implement strong career pathways with high expectations. And that community youth organization aspect of it, public-private organizations and programs, is also another place to innovate, another option besides trying to force vouchers, charter schools, or some of these alternative models. We can innovate in other places, and students are not just learning in the four walls of a school. Let's talk a bit about the achievement gap and some of the resource realities, because I think we need to be direct about our challenges. So while about 36% of all MMSD students are advanced or proficient in math, only 6% of our Black students reach these levels. So this is an unacceptable gap. I know it's something we've been trying to solve for many years, and I believe we're making progress. The question is, are we making progress fast enough? And I'll kind of tie it up at the end of what I think it will take at the school board level and the district administration level to really move these numbers. We can look at what has happened at Cherokee Heights. We've seen attendance rise above 90% across all grades. We've seen behavioral incidents drop dramatically. And this wasn't just magic. It was implementing proven practices systematically. The resource realities, let's talk about resources. Any serious discussion about implementation has to address funding. So right now, MMSD faces a $66 million annual gap in special education funding alone. And when adjusted for inflation, we're dealing with a $3,300 per student shortfall from previous funding levels. Meanwhile, we're seeing concerning trends. The state has cut $3.5 billion for income tax relief while expanding voucher funding. Local districts are forced to raise property taxes to cover costs. A multi-billion-dollar state surplus exists that could support our schools. We'll get into more on funding in later sessions. Let's talk about implementation strategy. So how do we move forward? We need a 4-phase approach. The first, immediate actions. Expanding successful programs like AVID, continuing to resource them adequately and expand them where the demand exists. Implement high dosage tutoring where most needed, and that draw from volunteers and other hourly workers, perhaps retirees, even young professionals with the capacity to assist tutoring in the classroom and in schools, and reducing administrative burdens on teachers. Again, looking at those regulatory requirements, those policies, and figuring out if any are not serving the intended purposes. Building systems, developing comprehensive feedback systems, creating data infrastructure for real-time monitoring, and building sustainable professional development programs that are in demand, that are welcomed, embraced, that get our staff, particularly our teachers, excited to go to learn and implement back in the classroom. Third, long-term sustainability, secure stable funding streams, creating those career pathways in all high schools, and building comprehensive support systems. And then finally, I touched on this last week, it's going to show up in just about every one of these. Things need to be crystal clear when it comes to accountability and the metrics that we're tracking to. Getting it crystal is really, I think, a thing that's missing. There's so much to pay attention to, so much to read and study. We want to figure out what are those things that are absolutes, that absolutely need to be crystal clear, that everyone is paying attention to, everyone is tracking to. That's what clear metrics represent. All right, well, we are going to talk a bit about these questions here. We're going to push these out to various social media channels as well. So what we have here, the prioritization question here, which of these 5 evidence-based practices should be our top priority? Should it be higher expectations, teacher feedback systems, data-driven instruction? I know that there's a lot of effort that goes into testing the students in the fall and the spring, but is that data, is it effectively individualized, and does it help us see that growth, that individual student growth? That's what I'm talking about. And does it inform immediately the instruction that's happening in the classroom? Those are the things that I'm talking about when I say data-driven instruction that I've seen work well in some of those charter school models I shared earlier. High dosage tutoring and increased instructional time. Second question I have for you all, what's the biggest barrier to implementing these practices? Is it funding constraints? Is it administrative burden, professional development needs, resource allocation, or something else? And third, how should we expand career pathways? To enhance programs in existing schools, more business partnerships, additional counseling support, expanded internship opportunities, or something else, or maybe all of the above. Would love to hear from you all to understand what you're thinking and where the ideas are and what those ideas are. All right, so I've gathered a handful of questions that I'd like to answer here. As I mentioned last week, some of these questions come from the community. Others are coming from organizations that run candidate questionnaires and then publish out to their network. So I wanted to, full transparency, make these a little bit more obvious. And so I'll start here with the instrumentality charter schools. So I think I've established here that the key about charter schools, it's not about the governance structure, it's about implementing what works. So Forward Academy's proposal, I mentioned, it highlights important needs around career pathways. But these opportunities should be available in all of our schools, and in many ways, they already are. We maintain economies of scale. We maintain diverse learning communities and equitable resource distribution by strengthening our existing public school system. And as we've established here, those thoughts about public charter schools governed by the local Board of Education, again, instrumentality, it's a formal term, instrumentality governed by the local Board of Education, non-instrumentality, not necessarily governed by the Board of Education. So let's really think hard about what we've heard, consider what the evidence shows us. I mentioned that Dobby and Fryer article and the 5 factors that drive student success: high expectations, frequent teacher feedback, use of data to guide instruction, high dosage tutoring, and increased instructional time. And again, none of these practices require a charter structure. There's no magic here. Not easy to implement, simple, not easy, right? But we need to build the will and the backing and the resourcing, adequate resourcing, in order to carry these out. And I think I also mentioned earlier that I just want to be crystal clear here. Increased instructional time doesn't necessarily mean longer school days. I think kids are already in school long enough. We just need to use that time more effectively. We need to reduce administrative burdens so teachers can focus their energy on classroom instruction. When we free teachers from excessive paperwork and meetings, we create more meaningful instructional time within our existing school day. And that's the point that's central to my platform. I was thinking about an example where this has shown up in my own life, and we're coming up on tax season here. We use a tax preparation software, and it has actually gotten a lot easier to file. Like W-2 pulls in automatically, which is awesome. A lot of the investments pull in automatically, which is awesome. They even kind of give you a pace of how you're doing to the average tax filer, which I kind of like the competitiveness of it. So that's an example where what used to be pen and paper and quite arduous has been made. There's still taxes, but it's been made just a little bit better by removing some of that excessive paperwork and increasing productivity. What are your thoughts about private charter schools governed by third parties? So this is that non-instrumentality schools question. The data on non-instrumentality charter schools raises some significant concerns, particularly around equity, around accountability, and resource allocation. And here's why I'm skeptical. So this is going to be, central to my platform. I'm going to have this available on the website as well. First, these schools, they often operate with less oversight while still using public funds. They might offer more programmatic flexibility, but this comes at the cost of reduced transparency and potentially weakened accountability. We need clear measures of effectiveness and strong oversight of any school receiving public dollars, period. Second, the research shows that these schools contribute to resource fragmentation. And what I mean by that is they typically operate outside the district employee contracts and benefit structures that can lead to higher staff turnover and less stable learning environments. And when teachers lack the protections and the support systems of the district, educator retention and student outcomes can suffer. And third, these schools can inadvertently increase segregation and inequity. We're going backwards in many ways. So while often well-intentioned, they can draw resources away from school districts that serve our most vulnerable students. And the promise of innovation needs to be weighed against the potential impact on our broader school community. So I'd propose that instead of considering non-instrumentality charters, we should focus on implementing these proven instructional practices in our existing public schools, supporting teacher innovation within our district framework, using data to identify and scale what works, maintaining strong accountability and transparency. All right, that is the non-negotiables. We need to start there. The goal should be excellence through equity. That's number one in my platform. I've been talking about in the campaign, ensuring every school has the resources and the support to serve all students effectively. All right, and I'm going to wrap up here with vouchers because it's been getting a lot of attention at the national level, state level. What are vouchers? Basically using public funds to pay for private schools. Excuse me. So to be clear, I oppose the expansion of voucher programs based on both the data and the fundamental concerns about public education funding. And here's why. So number one, vouchers represent a significant drain on public education resources. And I mentioned some of these trends earlier. In Wisconsin, we're seeing concerning trends around the state cutting $3.5 billion for income tax relief while expanding voucher funding. Local districts being forced to raise property taxes to cover voucher costs. And in effect, this is creating taxation without representation. Again, it's creating taxation without representation. Public money going to non-public accountable private and non-instrumentality schools. There's also a multi-billion-dollar state surplus that exists that could support public schools, but it's not being used. That's a problem. And that's something, as a MMSD board member, I commit to digging in on and advocating for not just our district, but other districts who are facing similar pains with funding shortfalls. Number two, vouchers exacerbate educational inequity. They often benefit families who could already afford private education. They rarely cover full private school costs, and that limits access for low-income families. Private schools can select their students. Public schools serve everyone. They can't select their students. They open their doors and their arms to any student. And there's limited accountability there for academic outcomes, despite the use of public funds. Third, and finally, vouchers undermine the core promise of public education. And I might even go so far as saying, because public education is so tightly tied to our democracy, vouchers undermine the core promise of our democracy. So while the state sits on this surplus, special education reimbursement has fallen to 31%. And that's created a $66 million annual gap for MMSD alone. The revenue limits have created a $3,300 per student shortfall when adjusted for inflation. And if there was one data point that really, for me, hit home about what this means to our entire state, 122 districts statewide were forced to go to operating referendum this fall just to maintain services. That's the problem. Many of those passed, but some didn't. And that, what are those districts going to do? They're going to have to make some really difficult and perhaps even unfair decisions in the coming months and years. So instead of expanding vouchers, we should restore state funding to pre-2010 levels. We should increase special education reimbursement rates. We should adjust revenue limits for inflation. And we need to invest in evidence-based improvements in our public schools. Those evidence-based improvements that I mentioned earlier. Public funds need to strengthen public schools that serve all students, not subsidize private education for a few. All right. I threw this in here last minute because anyone talking about inadequate choice, this is the 9th grade course selection at Madison West, and I would assume similar at the other high schools. So you see quite a few required courses here, a range of courses, particularly in math, which makes sense. I know that students can start to spread out in how far along they are in math as early as elementary school, but they offer things like algebra, geometry, algebra trig already for freshmen, and they offer many of these as honors. But what really, for me, kind of hit home, it's not particularly legible here, but I'll read out a few of these here. You've got academic skills, like resource hall, study hall, but interdepartmental studies, art, business and marketing, information technology, dual language immersion, family and consumer science, performing arts, physical education, technology, engineering, construction, and world languages, and just look at the wide selection of options for all of those. So, choice is alive and well, and I think it's a matter of tailoring an approach. And the students are, from what we heard last night at Madison West, students and their families are really, they need to take an active role. They are responsible to figure out what is the best fit and sign their students up accordingly. Of course, there are counselors and advisors who are available for this. But I just wanted to point out that this to me seemed like a really robust amount of choice available to high schoolers in Madison. I just wanted to celebrate that. So let me wrap up here with 3 key takeaways. Number 1, 30 plus years of charter schools and that research. Many alternative school models have been in existence for much longer than this. This has shown our school leaders what works, and these 5 evidence-based practices that can transform outcomes. We have examples of success right here in Madison. And our focus should be on implementing these practices systematically across all schools. We only have so much energy, so much attention, so much resourcing. Where do we want to put all of that? We want to put it in the next idea, as innovative as it sounds or as it might be, or do we want to allocate scarce resources on proven things that work? In my mind, we should always be going to those proven methods and figure out how to do those things better. All right, and I hope you're all on board with me on that. It's just a few ways to get involved. Join our next town hall. We're doing this every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. I'm hoping that next week we'll be able to return to belonging and particularly mental health in schools. I'm trying to line up a special guest for that. a well-known physician in the Madison area, and hopefully that will come together, if not next week, perhaps the following week, and talking specifically about mental health, the epidemic that our students are facing, and mental health, what it means for our students, but also the families, the staff, and the teachers. You can share your ideas through our community feedback form, or feel free to email me from the website, bretwagner.com. You can get involved in your school's improvement efforts as well. And I hope for all of you here watching that we've helped reframe this school choice debate. The choice isn't between governance structures. It's not between different types of schools. You can do this within the public school system. It's between implementing what works or continuing with what isn't working. And that's really where we're focusing time and energy. Thank you for joining tonight's discussion. Remember, every school can be a great school when we implement what works. And your kids, these students, they deserve our best. I look forward to next week. Take care, everyone, and reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.